Hello everyone, it's Sgt Andrew Pardy here from the Police Pagan Association. I've been asked to do a little bit for the Disability Forum presentations that are going online over the next couple of days. I'm recording this on a beautiful Beltane day, and I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for taking the time to listen to me. If you see me looking up to the left or right, it's because I've got some cheat notes behind the camera that I'm going to refer to, because I'm not very much of a public speaker. So if you see me looking up, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's because I'm just trying to remember what I'm trying to say. I've got a couple of things I've been asked to include in my speech, and obviously open to questions, which I normally get lots of, afterwards on the day. So first of all, obviously a proper introduction. Like I said, I'm a serving sergeant in Hertfordshire Constabulary. My name's Andrew Pardy. I've been a pagan for 22 years now, and I'm currently based in Hertfordshire, which is a lovely combination of rural and city. Nice combination. Lots of pagan presence in Hertfordshire. We've got some good sites at Icknield Way and other sites that lead all the way up to the likes of Avebury and things like that. I was previously a technical designer for aerospace companies, and also worked for the Virgin Megastores as a loss prevention manager, but primarily because I like music. Before I became a police officer, I didn't grow up wanting to be a police officer. It's just something that happened through work, and partially joined because it seemed like a good career choice at the time, but also because I've been badly treated by the police as a youth. As a youth, I had bad taste in clothing and music, like heavy metal, wore a leather jacket with painted band names and stuff on it, and very often got told by the police it was my fault when I got beaten up because of what I looked like. So it sounds a bit cliche, but I joined the police not just to make a difference to the community, but actually to make a difference to the police and change it from within, change its outlook. It's very institutionalised here and just back in the 90s. I was married in 2000 to my beautiful wife Charlotte, who's also a pagan. We were handfasted in 2005. We've got twin boys, aged 16, who are actually both disabled. They require topical treatments, about 22 medications a day, continuously, due to allergic reactions and other similar things they have, which have been treated by St Thomas's Hospital. My wife works from home as a counsellor, psychodynamic therapeutic counselling, but is also their carer. So we have some experience of dealing with disability. And I myself have disabilities in the form of PTSD and also depression. Depression from a long time ago, PTSD through work-related incidents, which can sometimes be quite crippling and quite dark. I am a heathen. I follow the heathen path, although I'm open to all faiths. I studied faiths almost as a way to rebel back in my youth, became very interested in faith as a whole. But found paganism and eventually worked my way to heathenry, which is my chosen path now. I often get asked how being a pagan is compatible with being a police officer, and whilst I can't speak for my colleagues and friends from all different paths, because I have colleagues in the police force who are druids, shamans, Wiccans, all paths, eclectic, I find that actually it's very compatible with my heathen beliefs. There are obviously the 9 noble virtues, and some would argue that that's not the be-all and end-all of heathenry, but it's a good place to start. So you've got things like courage. That goes without saying in some aspects of police work. We're not doing heroic things all day long. Sometimes we're putting tickets on cars or helping an old lady up the stairs, but it does take courage to do some of the stuff we do, from dealing with violent offenders all the way up to some of the more tragic stuff that we have to deal with. Obviously, discipline is another aspect of the 9 noble virtues. We have to be disciplined. We have to do what is necessary and right in hard circumstances. Sometimes the perception of the public as what we're doing is not always got all the facts to hand. So we have to be quite disciplined and take positive action regardless sometimes of what the public think, and then explain ourselves to them afterwards. Fidelity, which is remaining true to family and friends and to those whom I pledge my services, and in that case as a police officer my pledge of service is to you, the general public, everyone. We are public servants, we police with the permission of the public, and I think sometimes we forget that. It doesn't mean that we have to bow down to every whim that a member of the public tells us. We very often get the old "I pay your wages, you do what I say." It doesn't work that way. But what it means is that we've got to police with your best interests at the forefront of everything we do. And for that reason, we've got to remain accountable and open, apologise when we make mistakes, and be held to account when we do things wrong. So, in addition to that, we also have honour, where we have to stand by our oaths as a heathen, and I'm sure as most pagans do, we take oaths very seriously. I take many. Obviously, I swore an oath to the Queen and to the community when I became a police officer, and every time I stand up in court and take the oath, that was traditionally when I affirmed, but obviously now I use the pagan oath in courts, which I can come on to later. Hospitality, obviously, that's to make everyone welcome, to make them feel part of the group, and to open your house and home to them. But also in the police aspect, it's working with communities, making them feel welcome, making sure that they are aware that we are there for them, and to help them through some of the hardest times that they encounter. They don't generally call the police if things are going well, so we have to make them feel welcome and at ease when we deal with them. Industriousness is hard work. Can't speak for all my colleagues obviously, but I'm a hard worker. I like to think so anyway, and the general work that I do is difficult and hard. Perseverance is pressing on against all odds, which again in this job is part and parcel of that. So, working hard, keeping going, sometimes in really difficult circumstances, both emotionally and physically, in the job. Self-reliance is another aspect of the noble virtues, where we learn from others and do not become a burden, and what that means is basically play your part in community, provide services, help to others, be an active part rather than a passive part, which I'm sure we all do in certain aspects, but I find that my job is very community based and gives a lot back. I feel that's what I want to do. And ultimately the last of the 9 noble virtues is truth. That goes without saying really. We need to seek the truth, we need to speak the truth, we need to defend the truth. Again, I think some officers lose track of that. We need to speak the truth at all times. We need to tell people realistically what's likely to happen. We need to be honest in all of our undertakings. We need to defend the truth, and we also need to seek the truth in some of our investigations. But obviously, we work with our court and justice systems to ultimately deal with the truth as well. In addition to obviously how heathenry fits in my work, obviously I'm an equality and diversity representative for the Hertfordshire Constabulary as well. So I deal with all aspects of equality, diversity and the protected characteristics, which obviously includes disability discrimination as well. So not only do I work with in workplace issues such as reasonable adjustments for colleagues who are injured in the line of duty, or disabled members of staff who need access to equipment in offices and things like that. I also deal with areas where employers or managers haven't managed disability very well, whether that be a temporary disability in the form of an injury or depression or something similar like that, or a long-term disability, which some people just don't seem to understand what is available to them, and I'm on hand to advise people how they can best manage that as well. Obviously I monitor and manage incidents to make sure that the police deal with disability crime. Well, if someone feels that they've been discriminated against on the basis of disability, I'm there on hand to give advice as to what legislation is available to them and how they can deal with that. I also promote things such as multi-faith chaplaincy. It's one of the earliest pieces of work I did in the constabulary, was to make sure that paganism was included in the chaplaincy for police forces, not just in my local one but across the country. And actually we won some awards from the Workplace Forum on Faith Awards in London based on that as well. So, onto the PPA itself. Enough about me. The Police Pagan Association was actually founded in 2009, but there'd been work going on ahead of that for almost a year. And it was primarily the result of work between the Metropolitan Police and Hertfordshire Police, which I work for 2 very different reasons. Hertfordshire Constabulary was always very open to paganism. I'd always been very open about my faith and my religion and my beliefs, not overly so, oppressively so, but I wasn't worried about talking about it to colleagues, and I was often met with polite inquiry rather than anything else. And I started up a local support group for pagan police officers in Hertfordshire. That very soon became knowledge throughout the police service, and some colleagues in the Metropolitan Police had tried to form a Pagan Association in the Metropolitan Police as a result of a badly researched document claiming to give information for officers on how to deal with pagan incidents, which was grossly misinterpreted, wasn't very well researched at all, and was full of so many inaccuracies. Officers felt it necessary to approach management and say, you have pagans within your ranks, we can advise you on this. And they attempted to form their own local group in order to be almost like an advisory board to the Metropolitan Police for future incidents involving paganism. However, they were met with a great deal of resistance, primarily from senior management at the time, due to certain issues with other staff support associations that had occurred, but also because of a personal agenda on behalf of a particular officer who shall remain nameless. As a result of not being able to get the support of the senior officers, we decided to collaborate and create a national body that would circumnavigate local management at a constabulary level. And so the PPA, as a national Diversity Support Staff Association, was born. We were soon joined by officers from Humberside and Hampshire, along with a few others over the coming months, and it created a bit of a following. We had to set up our initial business plan. We had to approach what was then called the Association of Chief Police Officers to prove that we were needed. They said, they tasked us with the job of proving that we were misunderstood and misrepresented. Fortunately for us, the Daily Mail got hold of the work I'd been doing, and obviously got hold of two very emotive terms, both paganism and the police, which they love both in equal measure, as you can imagine. And they did a lot of the work for us, basically, printing a lot of stories that were grossly offensive in some cases, misinterpreted, very badly researched, and we were able to provide a lot of evidence to them as a result of that. So essentially the Daily Mail helped us get going, which I'm sure they're very happy about. We are open to serving and retired police staff, and that's both ranked, i.e. police constables, all the way up to chief inspector and superintendents and chief constables, but also civilians. So we have a lot of civilians at the background of the police who do all the hard work and keep it going whilst we stay on the streets. And that includes our technicians, our office staff, even things like uniform stores and things like that. So we have a lot of civilians in our ranks as well. We also have members from partner agencies such as criminal justice, so court staff and security, lawyers, and places like UK Border Agency. So law enforcement agencies, but not necessarily the police. But we have members from across those. We have youth reform workers and things like that as well. The PPA was created probably at the worst time to start a staff support association. It was created during a lot of political upheaval and the beginning of the austerity issues. All funding was withdrawn from existing staff support associations, so large associations like the Black Police Association, the Christian Police Association and things like that were all of a sudden finding a lot of their funding taken away, and were having trouble maintaining the level of service and staffing that they'd been used to as a result of that. We were quite fortunate that we came in at that point because we never applied for or received any funding, so we didn't have to cope with the panic of having a lot of money taken away from us. So we were the first staff sports association in the UK to be created in line with a new structure that was recommended. A lot of the existing ones had had multiple committees and working groups and boards all over the place that met regularly, and it was very intensive in relation to funding, travelling, time, things that just could no longer be afforded with cutbacks and lessening staff and money. So we were created on the basis of having a single working committee, which is a chair, vice chair, treasurer, I've got to try and remember now, we've got a secretary, and we have some liaison officers as well on the working committee. And we also have a network of officers called First Point of Contact officers. Now they were traditionally both serving police officers and serving members of staff, but due to recent legislative changes, that's now going to have to all be serving police officers, which is unfortunate because we've got some very good FPOCs that are currently in civilian roles. The first point of contact is basically a pagan police officer in every county in the UK, so one for every police force, who serves as the first point of contact for local issues, local pagan groups, that answers back to the committee. So we've got this support network across the UK. Now, not every police force has one yet because we are quite a small staff association, but generally you've got some dedicated first point of contact officers that cover several areas and do a lot of hard work in the background, supporting us and feeding back to us. We are funded, therefore, purely by a one-off membership payment from everyone. It used to be that we charged an annual subscription, but because we're so small and we're also managed by volunteers, and also a lot of us do shift work and are often called away at last minute, we can't necessarily offer lots of social events or things like that. So we didn't think that charging people an annual fee was fair, because we didn't think we were giving them back enough to justify a yearly membership. So we decided to have a one-off membership fee which covers the cost of their starter pack, but also means that they get updates via news quite irregularly, unfortunately, but also updates in relation to events and things like that that are generally put up on our website. We also sometimes get payment from local budgets. I'm quite fortunate in Hertfordshire Constabulary that I have access to the Faith Fund, which I share with a very close colleague from the Christian Police Association in Hertfordshire, where I can pay for local promotion and stuff, but also use some of that to buy things like cups and pens and promotional items, such as what we were distributing at Pagan Pride last year. Our aim, primarily, because we're a diversity staff support association in the police, is to support pagans in the workplace, i.e. the police workplace. So colleagues in the workplace who are having issues with, I don't know, taking pagan holidays off, for example, or feel they're being discriminated against on the basis of their faith, or that an incident hasn't been dealt with properly because it involved an element of pagans, and we're there to support them primarily. However, we're also there to support pagans who come into contact with the police. That's whether they are victims of crime, witnesses, or even offenders. The police traditionally knows very little about paganism, and so if you get, for example, a prisoner in who claims as being pagan and wants access to certain things, we can give advice on that, but we can also advise that individual as to the likelihood that they will have that access. For example, witnesses and victims of crime, we can support them from the moment of reporting all the way up to court, reassuring with access of things like the police pagan oath that they can use in court instead of affirming, and other things like that. It's basically just to reassure people that they won't get misunderstood or mistreated by the police if they identify themselves as pagan, and to reassure them that there are pagans in the police service who understand exactly where they're coming from and can give them both sides of the story, both the police and legislative side of things, but also the practical and faith side of things that they're coming from. We also strive to improve the relationship between the pagan community and the police. Although it's very different today, traditionally the relationship between pagans and the police has been a bit fraught, shall we say. Let's face it, a lot of our friends and colleagues within pagan circles worship nature, as we all do, and therefore may partake in aspects of nature, if you get my drift. That might not be compatible with the legal side of things in this country. So there's that element, simple things like that, but also other things like misunderstandings such as public nudity, not that happens very much in this country because of the climate, but also things like public rituals, the carrying of athames and ritual weapons and things like that. There's this worry that the police will not take them seriously, not believe them, or treat them with distrust upon finding out that they're pagans, just through mutual misunderstanding. And also traditionally, unfortunately, again back in the bad old 80s, a incident called the Battle of the Beanfield up near Stonehenge was quite an earmark for how the police treated pagans and New Age revellers back in the day when they tried to set up the Stonehenge Free Festival, and that was an incident which appeared in the papers. If you Google Battle of Beanfield, you'll be dismayed at how people were treated by the police, and you can understand why some of the some of our more mature colleagues, some of the older pagans, may have a bad memory of the police and how they were treated just purely on the basis of what they believed in. It's back in the days when the police were maybe being used as a tool by the government then to come down heavy-handed on anything that didn't conform. I mean, ultimately ended up with 1,300 police officers versus 600 primarily peaceful travellers just trying to go to Stonehenge to celebrate solstice and other such things. There's a High Court injunction in place. 537 people out of those 600 people were arrested, and that's the largest mass arrest of civilians in British legal history. And these are facts that aren't known all over the world, and not very well known at all in the UK. But it had a significant impact on the pagan community back then that still has resonance today. Ultimately, the police were found at fault. There was a police officer that was charged with ABH following it, and High Court awarded many of the travellers costs and found offences of false imprisonment, wrongful arrest and damage. Unfortunately, they were awarded costs but not their legal costs, so the awards for damage that they got barely covered their legal fees. But ultimately it was a moral victory by the pagan and New Age communities against the police back then, but it still has impact now on how we interact. So, I mean, that's one of a couple of reasons why it's important to us to build that relationship between the police and the pagan community. And it's a lot of ongoing work we do, a lot of the community stuff that we do, like speaking at the Pagan Federation 40th anniversary event and Pagan Pride and things like that. We also did an event at Moonhenge, which was absolutely fantastic. Our first public outing other than the 40th anniversary event. We were very well received. A lot of people asking us what we were doing there. But when they found out, pleasantly surprised, which is always nice. There are obviously several things that we cover, many of which are on our website, which I'll give you later. But obviously, as I mentioned before, there's a reason that pagans sometimes distrust the police because they don't know how they're going to be dealt with in relation to things like rituals and public nudity and things like that. And we're doing a lot of work now with local moots and stuff like that, making police teams aware of their local groups and points of contact. So if they do get an erroneous report from a dog walker walking through the forest who's seen 6 people with a fire in the middle praising the gods in the forest for a ritual, you know, we can assure them that it's a local pagan group, meaning no harm to anyone, just partaking in worship. And we can also provide advice to the police in relation to rituals that are taking place by other means, and by that I mean we get some inquiries in relation to occultist practices that happen for one reason or another, and they'll come to us and say, well, we've found this evidence or this happening, what can you tell us? And we're able to tell them whether that's a genuine pagan ritual or a local group of note, or whether it is kids mucking about, occultist groups, or not pagan related at all. So we're able to give them a little bit of insight into those sorts of things. An incident would be, an example would be, we were contacted by City of London Police in relation to an incident outside St Paul's Cathedral, in which there was, don't laugh at this, there was a ram skull put on the steps of St Paul's Cathedral with several tea lights put around it in a circle. It was on top of a picture of some naked breasts, and had some writings in some weird glyphs written in what appeared to be blood on both the floor around it and on the door. And the police officer very kindly said that he'd been made aware of us, which is always nice. Sent me some photographs and said, "Any ideas?" I was like, no, not really. That's not pagan at all. I was able to advise him that wasn't a pagan ritual that I was aware of. I mean, I don't claim to be an expert on all aspects of paganism. There will be sometimes I defer to colleagues from other places, such as the Pagan Federation or other groups, OBOD example. But on this occasion, I will say that I don't think that's paganism. I think that's someone being a cultist, possibly making some sort of statement against St Paul's Cathedral. So things like that, we can provide advice on things like that and let people know when something isn't pagan as well. Obviously, allegations of abuse is a sad aspect of what we do, and whilst 99% of us are all law-abiding, just going about our way and celebrating our faith as we should do, Obviously, we're all aware, or might not be, a recent news article in which there was 2 men that were successfully arrested and charged for sexually abusing several girls and women under the pretense of it being an initiation ritual for pagan worship. We were only involved in that to a small extent, I'll be honest, but we were able to give some insight and advice into what is expected, into levels of initiation in certain aspects of Wicca, and what is and isn't acceptable. And ultimately these people were found to not be genuine pagans at all, and to just be utilising that in order to commit these horrible offences. But we are also able to advise where there are people who are pagans, who are taking advantage of their role within a moot, a group, a clan. It doesn't happen very often, but the sad truth is, since that newspaper article and people going, oh, the police might take it seriously then, we have had a couple of historic victims of abuse come forward, stating that they've been taken advantage of by pagans who've misused their rank, their position of trust to take advantage of people. So the good news is people are feeling confident in reporting it to us. The sad news is that some of these people are people who claim to be genuine pagans taking advantage of that. So we're working with that. Rest assured that is a very rare phenomenon. It's sad that we have any at all, but again it's something that we can provide a perspective on from both a law side of things and a pagan side of things, and ensuring that those victims of crime are taken seriously, and most importantly don't feel like they're going to get blamed for getting into those situations, because a lot of them worry that by becoming part of a group and going through, some of them, genuine initiations as well, that it may be argued that they put themselves in this dangerous situation and we're almost at fault. And we know in these circumstances only the offender is at fault, and we need to reassure these victims of crime that by pursuing a pagan path and being taken advantage of is not their fault. And that's another aspect that we've found ourselves very heavily involved in recently. In relation to the possession of weapons, we've worked on both sides of that as well, positive and negative. We've had people who are genuinely on the way back or to a ritual in possession of an athame, on one case a ritual sword, and we were able to do some background work, confirm that they had been en route or on their way back from a ritual, and also the method in which they had it on their possession was suitable, i.e. they didn't have the sword out of its sheath hanging down by its sides, swinging it around the town centre. They had it in their boot of their car. It'd been found on a routine stop for no other offences or anything along those lines. We were able to say those are genuine adherents, they have them for a genuine religious purpose and therefore not committing any offences. On the flip side, we've also been able to advise when people are in possession of weapons for other reasons and have then used the fact that they're pagan as a means to try and escape conviction. And we've been able to very quickly ascertain that they're not genuine pagan adherents, that they didn't have a lawful reason to have these items on them, and they've been prosecuted accordingly. In relation to that, I always get questions about this aspect of things. All I can say is sometimes it's worth just contacting your local station and saying there is a ritual, this place or another, I will be travelling between them with these items. I know it sounds really silly and people might be dubious about that, but try and get the contact for your local neighbourhood officer most of the time is the best point of contact, or even better, contact us and we can tell you who your first point of contact officer is for your local area and contact them. That way, if you are subsequently stopped with it, you'll have that contact between you and the police that already shows that you've got it for a genuine reason. Obviously, we have had people try and take advantage of that as well, and we come down heavily on those people. But most of the time we're able to help genuine people who've got their athame. In one case we had someone coming back from his own hand fasting in possession of his athame, and he left it a little bit late to tell us, so he'd already been charged to court for the offence. But we were able to do something called laying of information before the magistrates and tell them that this person actually had a defence in law, and therefore the case was thrown out of court. So we can always help with things like that. The other aspect we get as well, particularly sad for me because I'm a heathen, is this assumption of an element of underlying racism particularly in relation to northern heathenry. And again, that's something that we challenge as well. We're able to provide information on genuine pagan groups who have the furtherance of paganism at their heart, and those claiming to be pagan groups whose only agenda is to further racist agendas. Again, they're in the minority, but it's not clear to those outside paganism, or even some people inside paganism, as to which ones are genuine and which ones aren't. And again, we can provide that information. I've been challenged a couple of times in relation to my faith as being seen as predominantly racist, and I've been able to inform and educate people accordingly. Another element of the work we do is that we promote a pagan perspective at government level, working with what used to be called the Association of Chief Police Officers, ACPO, is now called the NPCC, the National Police Chiefs Council. And basically that ensures that there's a pagan perspective put in place in relation to legislation and rights at a government level. That working group answers directly to the likes of Theresa May and the law courts and things like that put law in place to ensure that any sort of legislation and law that's put in place doesn't unnecessarily discriminate against pagans, whether on purpose or otherwise. So we work at quite a high level. We also do things like promote the pagan oath at court and support those that wish to use it, because there are still some courts that are unaware of its existence, sadly, although there's been legislation for quite some time. And again, I get a lot of questions about this because people still don't know it exists. And ultimately, the pagan oath is an oath you can take when giving evidence at court, whether you're a victim, a witness or an offender at court, instead of affirming. Affirming is just making a promise, and it's not religiously affiliated, and some of you may still prefer to do that. But the pagan oath is, I swear by all that I hold sacred that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So it's quite open, and is actually also being used by Buddhists as well because of the nature of the wording. But ultimately it is referred to as the pagan oath in what something's called the Equal Treatment Bench Book, which the big judges that sat up on their throne at the back of the court have access to, and they know it exists, and by law all courts have to make that oath available to whomever requests it. There are certain very rare circumstances in which a court can refuse you access to that oath, but there is none that I can think of that would be readily used regularly at all, and they must do everything they can to accommodate access to that oath. And again, we get a lot of people who've had issues with getting access to that. We've been able to intervene on their behalf and make sure that they have access to that oath. So there's information about that on our website as well if you have any interest. And also one of the first articles I wrote for Pagan Dawn covered the pagan oath as well, because again, like I said, it's something a lot of people aren't aware of, and when they do find out, are very interested in. We also provide liaisons at public pagan events at which there might also be a police presence. An example would be one of our very dedicated first point of contact officers, Andy, went to the anti-fracking event at Glastonbury, where there was obviously a large pagan presence, as well as police who didn't know what to expect, weren't sure whether it was going to be violent or peaceful protest and things like that. And ultimately, Andy was able to act as a sort of go-between between the pagan community and the police there, just to keep them updated on what each other was doing, what was expected of them, and acting as a communicator, almost like a neutral communicator and liaison between them, to help the operation run smoothly, which ultimately it did. And in fact, Andy actually delivered a baby at that event, which went down really well with the member of the public who gave birth. That was, you can ask for better public relations than that, could you really? The other sort of things we do is we actually provide legal advice to government and police departments. An example of this would be one of the anti-terrorist department led by the Metropolitan Police that takes the lead on all things to do with extremism, released an advisory document on extreme right-wing symbolism. You may recall after the tragic killing of drummer Rigby that there was some graffiti put on a place of worship shortly afterwards. In relation to that, they released this document on extreme right-wing symbolism, advising police officers to look out for members of the public that had any of these on their clothing, tattoos, etc. Also colleagues that bore any. Now, alongside that, in that document, alongside the genuine fascist, symbolism such as swastikas, Sieg Heil symbolism, and lots of Hitler paraphernalia and Nazi symbolism, there was also genuine pagan symbols such as the Volknut and Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. And I think 4 of the items within that document I wear about my person every day. I've got some tattooed on my arm, I wear one around my neck, So, fortunately, a member of staff who saw it before it was distributed nationally forwarded it to me and let me know. And whilst it is an unfortunate truth that some racist groups do still wear things like the Volknut and things like that in the mistaken belief that it promotes white supremacy, I was able to get across that if we were to prosecute people for wearing things such as the Volknut and Mjolnir and that out of context, you would be unfairly discriminating primarily against genuine pagan adherents of the Northern tradition and some other paths. And ultimately we were able to include addendums to that document that let police officers know operationally that there would be people that wore some of those symbols, and those ones were identified, that were not white supremacists and were actually members of pagan faith. We had a bit of a legal argument with them because big important departments like the extreme right wing groups in the Met Pol don't like being challenged. But ultimately we won that agreement on the basis that had it been released in its original format, pagans would have been discriminated against and could have ultimately been prosecuted just for wearing symbols of their faith. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes for things like that we do, that ultimately makes sure that you are not mistreated by the police through the spread of misinformation. We also assist in investigations, like I said before, the aforementioned allegations of abuse. It is unfortunate that we are able to provide aspects of paganism in relation to ritual abuse arrests that I've mentioned before, but also people trafficking. It's a completely unexpected aspect of the Police Pagan Association work that we've become involved in a lot of people from indigenous African backgrounds in relation to people trafficking. If I can explain that, Operation Violet again is a metropolitan-led operation that specifically targets people being trafficked for immigration purposes and for the sex trade. And some of those people being trafficked, especially those from indigenous African countries, are being controlled through the threat of witchcraft, which many of them believe in vehemently, and is a very real threat to them. Now, unfortunately, members of the public who found out that their family members, children, etc. are being trafficked in this way, when they go to the local police station, obviously met with a lot of blank stares, as you can imagine. People either not believing them, or it being too complicated and then being fobbed off, for want of a better word, or even being treated as though they have mental health issues in some circumstances. And out of a last minute sort of desperation, they've been looking up police officers that might understand about their indigenous witchcraft beliefs, and they come to us. Now again, I don't pretend to be an expert on all elements of paganism, indigenous faiths across the world at all, but it has been quite a steep learning curve for me and us in the Police Pagan Association in relation to this. Again, it's not overly common, but it's far too many occurrences for my liking. And we have made an agreement with the Operation Violet operatives in the Metropolitan Police to become a first point of referral for a lot of these people. So they'll come to us and make an initial report, an allegation that a family member, a child, whatever, is being trafficked under the threat of witchcraft, and what's happening to them and where and whom, and get as much information as possible. And then we'd make that referral to the Operation Violet people, so that the referral is going to them from a police officer and has got all the information that's required, so that these people's concerns and allegations are being taken seriously. Now, I think only one of the applications we've had through has turned out to be someone, unfortunately, who has mental health issues, but we were able to do that work and find that out and ascertain that, and also get that person the help they needed. But there's been 2 or 3 where we've actually successfully taken people out of this routine, this trafficking circle, and also successfully prosecute several people responsible, just by our intervention and our understanding, and us taking the time to understand these people's beliefs albeit a far more indigenous and further reach of paganism than I'm used to. I can't talk too much about it. I do the old secret squirrel stuff here, but also we've been involved in cold case murder investigations in which there's been a slight occult element to it. Again, can't speak too much about it, but they've come to us as a first point of contact and said, "Do you, these are the circumstances, this is the information we've got. What can you tell us about it?" And again, whilst it's all occult based rather than pagan based, because there are elements of it which we're aware of. We all know certain elements of the occult, Crowley and all that sort of stuff. I've been able to give them some information that they would not know as a matter of course, and has had significant impact on their investigation. Again, can't go into too much detail about it, but it's been very, very positively received, I'm pleased to say. Obviously, we deal with day-to-day things as well, less exciting stuff, but still equally as important, such as discrimination in the workplace, but not just for the police either. We have a lot of civilians, pagans who are aware of our presence, who come to us stating that they've been mistreated or abused in the workplace on the basis of their faith. Obviously, because a lot of that is civil-based stuff, we've not been able to take legal action, but we have been able to put them in contact, or in some cases act as liaison for them to bodies that are able to deal with them, employment tribunal people, ACAS and the like of that, arbitration services, and deal with them as that, and be an initial referral for them as well. Another issue that we regularly deal with, that comes up regularly, is horse maiming. We get a lot of allegations of horses being ritually injured and things like that, and generally during the full moon, often perpetuated by local media, who have probably picked up the first interesting story since the bridge fell down 3 weeks ago, for example. Very, very often they're found to have injured themselves. Very rarely it is occultist behaviour. Again, more often it's other animals causing issues. But for some reason, the first conclusion that these people tend to jump to is that pagans have been injuring their horses during a full moon rite. We've been able to, again, advise people accordingly. Very often rural police officers, we've been able to give them advice as to what we do and don't do, i.e. we don't harm horses. And also been able to advise the newspapers, sometimes more harshly than others when they don't pay attention or they think it's funny. But we do take actions against that, again, to stop this perpetuated misinformation that the local press seem to revel in when it comes to paganism, because it makes for an interesting story. So we do a lot of managing of that, but again in a positive way, not to hide elements from the public, because it's important that it remains open and accountable to the public, but to make sure the information that they're receiving is correct, that it's researched and it's not dramatised just to make for a more interesting read. Ultimately, we also print off a lot of advisory documentation as well. We've got documentation available on our website in relation to how the police can deal with sudden deaths in a household. Unfortunately, one of our duties is we often get called to a house if someone hasn't been seen or heard from for a couple of days, and unfortunately we do find people who are deceased. And there are occasions where police officers have gone in and it's a pagan household. And although the routine is generally not that different based on faith, we have been able to advise police officers in relation to pagan households, ritual items, what can and can't be touched, protocols and things like that. And again, we have a document specifically available to that for download for everyone, public or otherwise, on our website. We also have documentation on our stance on behaviour in the workplace. We also funerary guides as well, and also advice on people giving evidence in court, like I said before about giving the pagan oath, but also generally what support is available to you, the processes you're likely to go through. So if you're concerned about what is going to happen if you're attending court, again, whether it be as a witness, a victim or an offender, that advice is available to you on our website as well. We also do have some advisory pages in relation to public rituals, nudity, advice to people, primarily non-pagans, in relation to sacrificing animals, which people for some reason still think that we do, and also the public possession of weapons, again, as I've mentioned before. All that stuff's available on our website. And all that remains for me is to give you our web pages and stuff, just to promote us towards the end. So our website is www.policepagan, Police Pagan Association, no spaces, .org. www.policepaganassociation.org. You're all welcome to go on there. It's not updated as much as I'd like because again it's all done by volunteers on shift work, but we do try and keep it relevant. If there's anything you'd like to see on there, please let me know. We also have a Facebook page. We have a public forum page on there, and we also have an actual association page on there as well. Feel free to come and have a look, join in the conversations, and let us know what you think. Additionally, I also, at the moment, I'm honoured to write regularly for Pagan Dawn. My latest article is one about homophobia, transgenderism in paganism, and how the two are compatible, despite what some people might think, in my opinion. Let me know what you think. I'm open to all questions. I'm really hard to insult, and please let me know whether you've had any experience of anything that we've done for you, what you'd like to see us do more of, how you think we could change for the better, if you think there's any room for improvement. I really am open to any advice or any comments that you might have, because although we're here primarily to support pagans, we are also a police staff association, and we're here to support all of you. We're answerable to the public, we just happen to have a little bit of knowledge on paganism. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me. I hope this video has been helpful, and I look forward to your questions. I'll be at a couple of Pagan Federation events in the forthcoming year, which we'll put up on our webpage. If you want to come speak to me in person, or you want to contact me, all my details are on the webpage and that. Please feel free to contact me. No questions too silly, and I get a lot of requests for advice in relation to things. If I can't help you, I'll know someone who can. I look forward to hearing from you. I'll speak to you all soon. I hope you enjoy the event and the other speakers. There's some great events coming up. Thank you.